One. Okay, what's going on, YouTube? It's PNG Media News back at with you with another segment. Today I'm gonna be stepping out of the Concrete and Steel Chronicles, which is a prison genre. And I'm gonna be talking about traditional as well as non-traditional organized crime in America. I have a very special guest. I have Joey from Underworld Legends. He's like a, historian, so to speak, of organized crime, Italian Mafia. So he's going to share a little bit of his expertise with us. So how's it going today, Joey?
I'm doing great, Mike. How you doing, man?
I'm cool. So tell the people a little bit about, your background or how you came into this whole, area of research and organized crime.
Right. Okay, so I'm 25 years old right now. I'm about to finish my last semester in college. I live out in Jersey, and I'm a business major. I kind of just got into, researching organized crime, kind of like, anybody else would. I started watching some movies, The Godfather and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to get like the truth behind it all. I was amazed, like, wow, this stuff really happened. I also have like my father's Italian, and I've just heard stories about like Mafia stuff from him. Like when he was growing up, he's told me a couple things that, interesting stuff that really like fueled my interest as well. And then my grandfather's from Harlem, like Spanish Harlem area. So he's told me about some stories too of like different aspects, not just Italian, African American or Puerto Rican, Cuban underworld figures that he heard stories about growing up as well. And yeah, that's kind of a combination of those things that got me really into it. I started doing some heavy research, not just like basic Google. Like I started off, it takes time to get better at it, but I started off using Google, and then I was like, okay, this isn't good. So I got deeper into like newspaper archives, like FBI files, documents like that. And that's kind of how I got into it. And then once I started reading like things that really happened for, whoever, whatever gangster, whatever you want to call it, back then, that's when I got hooked. I was like, oh, okay, so this was real. This is actually realer than like the stuff you hear in the movies, like better. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this: when your research, so when you watch a movie like The Godfather and Goodfellas, like how much of that stuff would you say is mythology, and how much would you say is real? Like, is there really a such thing as a mafia crime commission?
Oh yeah, well that stuff was real. Those movies aren't always accurate. I would say like Godfather does a good job of depicting it realistically. I don't, I mean, again, I wasn't there, but there's plenty of proof of existence of mafia, like the true mafia in American history. There's a lot of fabricated stuff in the movies though. A lot of the one thing I don't really like about movies too is a lot of them come from like the ones that are based on true stories, like Goodfellas, Casino, and even like American Gangster. A lot of the movies are like based on informants and stuff, kind of like guys who I feel don't deserve their story to be told in these movies just as well. And it paints like a bad picture to the public too. They label these guys as legends and stuff like that when for example, Frank Matthews, I know I'm kind of going off course, but Frank
Matthews or Frank Lucas?
Well, Frank Matthews, he deserves the movie.
Okay.
He's the real American gangster, if we're gonna say if we're gonna use that example. I don't know, so I don't really get too deep into movies once I started reading the truth in my research and stuff like that. So but yeah, obviously, like, when they make movies, it's based on something usually. So yeah, like I know the commission really did exist and things like that. But as far as like mythological things, there's a lot. One being actually like it's the opposite. Like Mafia didn't deal in drugs. That's a myth. I know they like try to use that in movies and stuff like that. That like the guys that say like don't touch the junk and stuff like that. Mafia dealt in drugs. I mean, that's a fact. They controlled the drug trade many years in America too. So yeah, I don't get too deep into movies because it it puts I don't want to say like it gives it a bad depiction. It's like it gives people a bad understanding, you know, movies do. So I'm not really a big fan, but yeah.
Okay. Now you started off. Now you mentioned like Frank Lucas. Okay, and that whole American Gangster. So from your research, like what were some of the issues with the way he was depicted, or the whole story depicted in the movie American Gangster versus what you've seen like in real life from newspaper articles and stuff like that?
Right, right. Well, the movie was based on his book slash the article that came out with I don't remember what year that was. I think early thousands on there was a news excuse me a magazine article that came out. But they don't. First of all, Denzel Washington does a great job in that movie, but I really have a hard time believing just a lot of it. For example, the Bumpy Johnson connection there. Of course, as you know, the that was completely like disputed in Mamie Johnson's book.
Mm.
That's a big one for me. That's just like, okay, I don't know how true that is. And then it's the other things being like he was an informant. I've also read that like he was more of, I want to say that like the face or the muscle guy of the Country Boys organization. I believe his brother Larry and his other brother Shorty, they were more of the, if you want to say, bosses of that.
Okay.
I mean, I've found research, like documents that suggest that. So little things like that as well. And just, I think Denzel Washington does just such a great job that it puts the viewer into like another, because that is a good movie. But the problem I have with that movie is that it's so inaccurate. So it just puts people that maybe aren't really good people. Like it makes him look like a good person, kind of, if you know what I mean. I don't know. I just don't really like the American Gangster movie because it's just not accurate.
Okay. Now, a few minutes ago, you mentioned another character, Bumpy Johnson. Now, there's a lot of lore around Bumpy Johnson. Like some people paint him, as just a flunky for the mob. Others paint him as just like this larger-than-life, African American gangster. And there's like this upsurge of interest in Bumpy Johnson because of the TV show Godfather of Harlem. So, in your research, what do you know about Bumpy? Where did he fall on the spectrum of gangsters in his era?
I think Bumpy figured out how to adapt to the times. I think the Italians realized how much money that could be made in Harlem, but Bumpy was the man that controlled that. I mean, I guess you could say he was, in a sense, at the thumb of the Italians, but I think it was more collaborative than some people might think. As far as that relationship. Like I said, there was a lot of money to be made, the numbers racket, like narcotics, things like that. Bumpy did probably have to kick up to the Italians, as did people like Red Dillard just operating at the same time. Like there was a Lucky Luciano connection for both of them, from what I've found. So I think.
Do you think? No, I was gonna say. So do you think that, like, when you say kick up to the mob, you think it's more of a, like, more sort of, okay, I'm gonna pay you a percent of mine because you help keep police off my back, or so it's more of like a working together as opposed to I'm your boss, that type of thing. It's more of a working relationship.
Yeah, okay. I think it was more like that. I mean, Bumpy was the man to see in Harlem, right? So if the Italians wanted to get some money out of African American Harlem, the illegal rackets, he was the man controlling it. Of course, somewhat inheriting Madame St. Clair's organization, and they respected him. I think too. I think he was pretty feared. So, there's stories where, you know, the Italians might have taken somebody like him out, but I think it says a lot about him that he did do a lot of prison time. But I think it, you know, says a lot about him, how long he lasted, you know, and died of natural causes. Like a lot about his character and the respect, you know, the Italians, for example, probably had for him. But I think it was just a working relationship. Bumpy realized that he probably, you know, maybe couldn't expand or the way he wanted to. You know, he did stick to Harlem. There are stories of him. I've read that he like went to Cuba and things like that, but he had some business out there. But he wasn't as white collar, I guess. So but it wasn't his fault. I think it was just, you know, a matter of the times and, you know, like class, social structure and all that kind of stuff, and race issues. I think he realized he had to take the back seat. Yeah, he could control Harlem, you know, don't get it twisted. The Italians had to go through him though. I think that's what he really did. I think he controlled Harlem, and I think that it was like a working relationship. Yeah, more than, you know, they were at the thumb, or he was at the thumb of the Italians. But,
okay. Now, I've heard you on some podcasts speaking about Bumpy, and you had some pretty fascinating stories. Like one that comes to mind about a watch that Babe Ruth gave him. Can you tell the listeners about that?
Yeah, there's a story that I actually came across. I can pull it up real quick. I'm not going to screen share it, but I believe it was in the early 30s. I could be wrong. Christmas. It was on Christmas Eve. I'll backtrack a little bit. Bumpy and Babe apparently had a relationship from, you know, going out at night. Babe was into the nightlife, you know, the night scene, and obviously, of course, Bumpy being the, you know, sportsman, the Harlem Playboy that he was always out. And I believe that's where they met, maybe at the Cotton Club. Yeah, and one Christmas Eve, Babe gifted him the Cartier watch, and it was engraved to Bumpy from Babe, Merry Christmas. So yeah, they had a friendly relationship for sure. And that watch was for sale. I don't know about now, but yeah, that would be a cool one to.
Yeah,
That would be a cool watch to add to the collection. You know.
I know, right? Definitely. Okay. And what are some other stories that you've heard about Bumpy, just from, you know, like you said, your grandfather growing up in Harlem? What kind of stories have been handed down to you?
Yeah, I've actually heard a couple cool stories. Not exactly handed down, but through, you know, researching Bumpy. Like I have used Google Maps to find the plot of the land that he was born on, in South Carolina, Charleston, I believe. Yeah, things like that. There was one story that I heard about him from someone he's actually from Harlem, an old timer. He's a friend of my grandfather's. And there was a story that at one club, or, you know, a bar, whatever you want to call it, there was a pool match going on at the pool hall. And there was one like little African American pool player better than everybody in the place, and he was just killing everybody. And then they apparently, like, the Italians one time found out and came through, and they were like, all right, you're gonna play our guy, we're gonna put money on this. And you know, the kid's name was Little Davy. So anyway, it got to this point, and I guess word got to Bumpy. And one day at this spot, when the Italians came in and were about to start the you know, the game, Bumpy walked in and he was like, all right, gentlemen, put your guns on the table. Like, and he walked in like the Godfather. And it turned out to be that young pool player was actually Little Davy was actually Dave. I can't remember the name. I think he was like the mayor of Harlem. David. I can't remember his name right now, his last name. But yeah, that was like an interesting little story. There was also
David Dinkins.
David Dinkins. Yep.
Oh, what? Oh, he was the pool player, the
Yeah,
future mayor of
he
Harlem.
was going off and he was like maybe 14 years old or 12 or something. And he
Oh,
was just
wow.
killing everybody at a pool hall one night.
Okay.
And like, the Italian, I guess the nearby Italian mobsters heard, and they were like, all right, well, we got our guy. You guys got to play. We're going to put money on this. And Bumpy got word and walked in and like said, put your guns and money on the table. Like, you guys really want to get to playing pool. We're going to play pool now. And like Bumpy had his back. And then it turned out that little Davy, the pool player, was David Dinkins. That was the story I heard about him.
Fascinating.
Yeah, really cool stuff. And then there's the story about the Peekskill riot. People don't know much about. I believe it was in '49 in Peekskill, New York. It was when Paul Robeson was performing, and a race riot broke out. And I don't know if Bumpy was already there. I read that he pulled up to the scene in like his Cadillac, and pretty much told like the angry white people, well, the angry white mob that were like yelling profanities at him. He was like, all right, well, I'm ready to bust some heads. That was a story I read about him that was really fascinating to me. And then there's another one that I found in my research. I don't know, you might have seen this one before. I actually got it right here. It's kind of dark, but there was a stabbing in Alcatraz. This is a rare picture, by the way, that I found.
Okay.
There was a stabbing in Alcatraz, and there were a few witnesses. There was a picture of Bumpy at court and a couple other inmates, actually one other inmate with him. And he testified as a witness, and he pretty much said that the guy who got stabbed was a rat. So like he was okay with it. But so here's this picture that I actually recently found. I'll read this first. It says, actually I can't really read what that says, but Manacle, I don't know what that says, and hampered by all right, never mind. This is like kind of blurry, but here's the picture. Okay. I don't know if you can see. Can you see that?
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's Bumpy in there chained up?
Yep, right there. It's chained up at court. Wow. So that was a cool picture. I don't know. It's getting blurry, but
yeah, I've never seen that one before.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to send you that when I get off.
Okay, cool.
It's a shame that this. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can Bumpy in there. Okay.
So that's a cool picture I found of him at Alcatraz, and there's little things like that I found. Through my research of Bumpy. And there's a few more things. I mean, hopefully maybe one day I could compile a bunch of stuff and maybe write a book on it.
That would be great.
But I have a few, I have a few rare pictures of him that I've came across and things like that.
Okay. So what do you think of that show, Godfather of Harlem?
I like the show. I don't really like the inaccuracy of it. It paints Bumpy in the wrong light. I just don't like now, people will take that for the truth. And that's the problem with some of these movies and shows. Bumpy deserves to have his story told, but not inaccurately. That's what I think. So, as far as the show goes, yeah, it's cool, but it's just so false. I don't know if you watched it recently. Sam Christian just got killed. That whole Sam Christian thing alone.
Yeah.
But it makes no sense. But if you realize they took that from Frank Matthews when he tries to organize all the dealers and stuff and says we can take this from the Italians, like that's what Frank Matthews did, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, yeah, Bumpy might have done that kind of in Harlem in the 50s, but nah. They took that from Frank, I think.
Exactly. Okay. So now you're from Paterson, New Jersey, correct?
Well, my family.
Okay. Now, from my understanding, that a lot of people don't know about Paterson, but that's kind of like a real gangster type city. Can you tell us like some of the historical gangsters who come from Paterson?
Oh yeah, of course. Well, I'll start early during Prohibition. Well, actually, I can even go before that. There were some Black Hand activity actually in Paterson as early as the 1900s, 1905. I mean, I wish I could screen share with you and I would show you a couple of the things that I have that I found. Yeah, but there was Black Hand activity in Paterson as early as 1900, 1905. I'll tell you the name of the Black Hand figure. His name was Gaetano Pettinelli. That's a Black Hand figure.
Okay.
You know, he actually murdered a police officer, I believe, and was acquitted. Yeah, and then you know, as time goes on, of course, in Prohibition, you know, some of the top mob figures they controlled operations in Paterson, specifically on the Italians front. The main, from what I've gathered, the main gangster was Willie Moretti, who got killed at Joe's Elbow Room in Cliffside Park for possibly being an informant. I don't know if you've heard about that. That's one of the more colorful mob hits. But they used to call him Babyface, actually. I have some pictures of him from then.
Okay.
He had a crew that ran a lot of stuff, beefed with the Jewish mob. A couple of his crew members were guys by the name of Joe Kid Steech Bongiorno. And the other one was a guy by the name of Anthony or Antonio Chicago Fat was his nickname, Sabio. Okay. And it's interesting because he was actually the uncle of Albert Tiny Manzo, who was a Genovese capital. I believe got killed in the 70s or 80s for skimming casino profits with another member, I forget. He was a Paterson gangster a little bit down the line. But back to Prohibition. Yeah, there were some colorful guys, and Willie Moretti being one of them. Actually, I've read that Willie Moretti, his son, and I believe it was a daughter of a gangster named Lodi Pete. And Lodi is another small town right near Paterson. And Willie actually lived in Highland Park, I think the name of the town is. Oh no, Hasbrook Heights, excuse me, right next door to Paterson. But he still controlled like a lot of the rackets in Paterson. But his son married the daughter, I think it was, or no, his daughter married the son of Pete LaPlaca. His name was Lodi Pete. He was a Genovese gangster as well, obviously, because Willie Moretti ended up in the Genovese family. But I would say he was probably the biggest gangster during Prohibition in Paterson. But then, like I said, there was a Jewish mob, it was actually Waxy Gordon's mob. Now, he wasn't headquartered there or anything. They say he ran a pipeline under the ground in Paterson, and he had some operators working for him. Colorful nicknames, cool, you know, interesting figures worked for him. There was a guy by the name of Big Opie Oppenheimer. He actually got murdered. There was one that went by the name of Meyer the Plumber Jacobs. He got murdered. And there was another they called Graveyard Gordon. So yeah, Paterson was it has some deep history. There was actually also a black mob there. I actually have a picture of him with me too. But I'm going to see if I can just change my settings real quick to make it not be blurry.
Okay.
Sorry, just give me 2 seconds because I want you to see this. Okay, so this should be better. So I mentioned Meyer the Plumber Jacobs. He was actually connected to the murder of the black mob boss during Prohibition. And no one was ever...
That was the black mob boss guy's name?
His name was Charles McCamey, but he went by Charlie Diggs, and here's a picture of him.
Okay.
It's kind of dark.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he ran numbers, big policy king, actually, for Paterson. Okay. And I'll read you a little bit of this clipping just to give you an idea. So the sub headline here is Chief of Rackets. Diggs was the Negro chief of rackets in this city, and during the past few years has been the agent of a Passaic syndicate that has been operating the number lottery game, which has flourished among the Negro population. His death is directly attributed by detectives to the breaking of the policy banks on Friday when a leak from the Treasury Department. Okay, so you get the idea.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Pretty fascinating stuff. I'll show you the picture one time.
Nice.
So yeah, that's Charlie Diggs. Yeah, and they say that he was beefing, I guess, feuding with the Jewish mob over there. And that's only prohibition, you know. I would say post-prohibition with the organization of the, Italian mafia. I would say they were the most active, the Italians. And there were mostly the Genovese family, then Luciano family, which pretty much inducted the whole Willie Moretti mob, which there were, he had his big organization. He was pretty much the boss of Passaic County. There was another numbers king in the 50s in Passaic, which is, town next to Paterson as well. His name was, I actually wanted to print the picture out of him, but I didn't get the chance to. His name was Slick. I can't remember his full name right now, but he was a big numbers operator in Passaic County.
I made you a host. If you got a picture on your computer, you can share it. I made you a host, so you should be able to screen share now.
Oh, okay. Let me just give me a second. I'll pull it up. I actually have it on I did a post of him on my Instagram. That's where I'm most active. So his name was, I'll pull up my Instagram actually. So how do I, share screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So can you see it or?
Then just click on the picture you want to share, then it should come up.
Okay, so this is, can you see my screen or?
Not yet.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. All right, now you can, right?
Okay, yep. Oh, okay,
so,
cool.
So this is Willis Slick Brown, and he was the Passaic County African-American numbers king for a while. And here's a little excerpt. Slick could be seen in his territory of Passaic's second ward, often sporting a big smile, rocking expensive suits and a diamond ring while riding around his big green caddy. Well-respected man and a familiar figure in his community's politics. When racial discontent arose, Slick would walk the streets of Passaic's second ward and urge people to stay cool. So, interesting character from the Paterson area. As there were others, there was actually another policy king a few years later. Here, how do I?
Just click stop sharing.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll pull that one up too.
Okay.
That was another interesting one. He was actually killed by Tino Fiumara, who was a Genovese, New Jersey heavyweight. So that was an interesting story that I came across too, and I can pull that one up right now. His name was, I believe it was Robert Bobby Harris, and that was another colorful numbers kingpin from Paterson.
So when these murders happened, like the Genovese would kill the African-American policy guys, was that part of like a war of shifting power, or what?
Well, in this particular case, this story that I'm about to show you when I can find it, yeah, they were just, I think it was a territorial dispute. I don't think this guy, Robert Bobby Harris, was kicking up. I think he stopped. Okay. He started operating and he was just doing his own thing. So they took him out. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. So here's Robert Bobby Harris, and he was a Paterson, New Jersey numbers boss. Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there's that. And you see in March 1969, they found him in the Meadowlands, which is where like the New York Giants, the football Giants play. The Jets, MetLife Stadium's there now. Big, I guess you could call it like a swamp. Landfills were there too, so you could probably say that was a big burial spot. Okay. But yeah, so he was rubbed out, quote unquote, by a Genovese crime family New Jersey heavyweight Tino Fiumara after he was caught operating his own joint in Genovese territory. And ignoring warnings, Fiumara committed the murder to make an example out of Harris. There's FBI documents on this. You can find them online. Genovese's were serious about having total control of the gambling racket in North Jersey. So here's Robert Bobby Harris. I think I have a, so there's Tino Fiumaro. And then here's the little, document I found on that. So,
Wow, okay, fascinating.
so yeah, and then I could show you one other Paterson figure that I have a picture of. His name was Emil Bonzi Issa, and he was actually of Syrian descent.
Okay.
And they say that was like the only thing that prevented him from being a made man. And from what I've heard, he was pretty in touch in, as far as organized crime goes in the area. Like he knew a lot of the prominent figures, Tiny Manzo, as I mentioned before, being one of them. And he, I think sometimes it benefits you if you're not Italian in some of these situations. I'm just trying to find it. Here, I'll stop sharing for now. But yeah, so yeah, Paterson definitely has a deep history as far as the underworld goes, and it's really interesting. I mean, just the nicknames alone really dragged me in.
Right, I know, right?
Some of the nicknames are just so cool. Guys like Bonesy, guys like Graveyard, Chicago Fat. And I'll tell you something about Chicago Fat. Actually, as I mentioned before, he was a top lieutenant of Willie Moretti, who was a Genovese heavyweight in New Jersey. The story goes on how he got his nickname was he went to Chicago during the Capone era, and he tried to muscle in on the rackets, and the Capone mob apparently either scared him away. I've also read that he was actually a member of the Capone mob. And I think his reputation was so big. I don't know if there's proof on this, but there was also some articles that I read that said he was a member of the Purple Gang. So I don't know how true that was. I think he just had such a reputation because I've seen like low-key gangsters of that time being linked to the Purple Gang. But Chicago Fat Savio, that was interesting. Probably something about him really intrigued me, his story. Chicago Fat, but yeah, I mean, the Al Capone connection, like, that's so cool. Purple Gang. And I know that he also made international dope transfers for Lucky Luciano. And I also read that Chicago Fat was a bodyguard of Lucky Luciano in Cuba. He went to Cuba with Lucky. So that was pretty interesting too. And, people don't realize. I'm just going to show you one more. This was the guy I mentioned before. His name was Emil Bonzi Issa. Here's a picture of him. But yeah, he was Syrian, and that was like the only thing that stopped him from being a made man. And he was deeply involved in gambling, as well as narcotics, extortion, things like that. He was respected.
That sounds like a very fascinating guy. Now, when you were sharing your screen a couple of minutes ago, I saw you go by a picture of an African-American lady. I believe it was Ella Baker. I mean, not Ella Baker. I believe that was Odessa Madre.
Yep, Washington.
Now, what can you tell me about her? Because she's a name that you don't hear too often.
Yeah, well, the story goes with her. I mean, it's obviously, I don't think we'll ever be able to know the whole story, but they say she was pretty significant. Washington, D.C. has almost like a weird underworld history. It's kind of weak. I don't think, for some reason, there was never much of an Italian presence there. But they say that she was like the boss during, I guess, Prohibition or the 40s during that time. And she apparently used to host like visiting gangland members from other cities. She owned brothels and had like many prostitutes. I think they say she might have been like lesbian, so she always had like a prostitute or multiple by her side. But yeah, like she could often be seen like in lavish mink coats, excuse me, and like she had a relationship with like guys like Duke Ellington, Nat King Cole, like Count Basie, Billie Holiday, and they performed at her Club Madre, I think it was called. And she used to have like extravagant parties, just all flashed out with just women all over her. And like her brothels had like 20 women. And like she was involved in dope peddling too, prostitution, obviously. I think gambling. Like you could like I know she would like flaunt her bankrolls and stuff like that. Like she would make headlines and stuff just for being herself. I know she always had like bodyguards with her. She had like a big Lincoln Continental. I think she died like in the 90s, I want to say. But like I read she had a net income of like 100,000. And she had police protection. She paid them off.
Okay. Can you flash her picture up? You still see her picture?
Yeah, I can do that for you. So here's a couple pictures. So here's Odessa Madre. And since I made this post, I've actually found different pictures of her. Here she is again. Here's a quote from her. If you show them that money, if you got a wad, honey, they'll suck up to you like you wasn't to zero. She deserves a movie, I think. That's a pretty cool picture.
Oh, yeah.
Here's her Club Madre.
Okay.
Today. Here's a couple of newspaper clippings of her. $15,000 crap game ends in shooting. Given prison term for narcotics. Underworld queen back to jail. So yeah, she was definitely an interesting character. And it's interesting to me that she mediated disputes between black and whites. I think that was mostly like numbers and gambling operators. So I think I want to say like the Italians had some kind of like deal with DC, and they said like we don't, we'll stay away from DC. That's what I think.
Makes sense. Yeah, I've heard similar because there wasn't really mafia presence in DC. So yeah, I've heard similar stories.
I know it's well, before I get ahead of myself, it's a shame that Odessa Madre actually died with like no money. So hopefully she has like some family. Maybe they can make a movie about her. That would be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know there was a black mafia presence in DC a little bit later. But yeah, and there was some like I think Jewish like numbers kingpins from there too. That I've came across, but for some reason it's not a very notable organized crime, as far as history goes. Area, but the crack era was a little different, but yeah, DC has like a weird history as far as organized crime.
Now I wanted to ask you something because you mentioned like the Jewish mafia and stuff like that. Okay, as far as you know, whatever happened with the Jewish mafia? Like pre-Italian mafia, you had guys like you had a pretty strong Jewish presence in organized crime, especially in New York. But as the Italians came in, it seemed that the last few remnants of them, like Benny Siegel and kind of worked with the mob, but the Italians came the premier face of it. How did that whole transpire take place?
I think it was kind of a mix of a few different things. Like you said, I think the Italians overall kind of flushed them out. And I think there's like a cultural aspect to it. I think some of those Jewish mobsters, and they encourage their kids to go into, be a lawyer or be a dentist, go into these, good career paths, where the Italians they didn't really transfer those ideals as well, I guess, if that makes sense. And, so the Jews kind of simmered out, with the last of the heavyweights being like Meyer Lansky, guys like that. Not to say that they didn't have a presence as much after that, but I think it kind of just, It was just a mix of different things, mostly being what I mentioned, though.
Okay. There's something else you mentioned earlier on. You mentioned the Black Hand. Now, was the Black Hand, was that like a pre-Italian mob group? What was really the Black Hand?
The Black Hand was just a style of extortion. And what they
Okay.
would do was they would send you letters in the mail, and it would be signed with a black hand, and it would pretty much say like, we demand such and such amount of money from you by this time, or we'll kill you, or we'll kidnap your kid, or whatever it may be. So it was really just an extortion tactic. I've done some research on it, and interestingly, Black Hand ideals actually come from the Balkan region. I want to say it was Serbians who were the originators of the Black Hand, and I can actually look into that real quick, which is interesting. Many people don't know, but it was actually like a secret military society.
Okay.
That was like formed in Serbia, and they were like instrumental in like starting World War I and stuff, and that their logo kind of became like the face of it. But it of course, it has its roots in that area because Sicily and southern Italy is down there too. But yeah, they would pretty much every Italian community in America in the early 1900s had infiltration of this ideal of a mafiosi, and they just used Black Hand extortion tactics, and then the public, that's media put that in the public, the Black Hand, and that's kind of the name that stuck.
Okay.
But yeah, Black Hand is really just, it's a style of extortion, sending letters that are labeled the Black Hand, threatening.
All right.
Letters.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, because we talked a lot about the early historical, crime figures. I want to kind of bring it up to today. I want to ask you this. You know how, like, some of the guys we mentioned, like Bumpy Johnson, they were racketeers and gangsters, so to speak, but they kind of lived by a code. You know what I mean? They had like qualities. They kind of cared about the community. The same with the Italian mob guys. They stuck to Omerta, kept their mouth shut. So what do you see? How did all that change to like the guys now? These so-called gangsters, they don't care about who they shoot. They go bust a drive-by in a second. As soon as the mob guy gets busted, the first thing he wants to deal, he's not even thinking about Moretta. What do you see that big shift in change? Was it just that the gangs got weaker, or society changed? What do you think happened?
I think it's a combination of all of that, like you just mentioned.
Okay.
I think over time, society changes. I think you could give some credit to law enforcement too. I think they've done a lot of, a pretty good job putting pressure on these guys, that, the lessons are instilled over time. Guys do a lot of time in jail, and, people see that, they don't want that. So they'd rather just snitch and tell and, get away with it nowadays, I guess. And that changes with, over time, societal ideals and things like that. I also think technology might have something to do with it too. Nowadays, just everything is so much more available and visible now too. There's more proof. That's another thing that I think contributes to that. But yeah, it's interesting. I can't exactly, I guess, put my finger to that, but that's definitely interesting that you're right. There's a lot more informants and things like that. But I think it's just a combination of, the things we mentioned pretty much as times change.
And then also, in your opinion, with the change of the crime, like, back in the day, it was bootlegging, numbers and stuff like that. And with the drugs and the multiple types of drugs being the big commodity, how much of a force is the traditional Cosa Nostra? Are they still function? I mean, I know they're obviously still around, but are they a major force to deal with? Or because I know there's been such an influx of different ethnic organized crime, Russians, Albanians, Yugoslavian, not to mention the African American and the people who've already been here taking up the reins. How big of a force do you think the mafia is today?
Well, as far as in America, there's still a force. I think they're a lot smarter now. They're a lot more white collar. They're a lot
Okay.
more technological.
Okay.
They're kind of removing from the streets, and that's why you're seeing these other groups fill in. Like Albanian. These new groups you hear about. That's kind of what I think about that. And it's also, just like we were mentioning before, just times change and patterns change. Different opportunities, like you mentioned, the prohibition with bootlegging and drugs coming in. But I think, the Italians have taken so much heat for this for so many years. I think after a while, it kind of just, so much stuff adding up, pressure from like law enforcement, guys going away for life, just that happening for 100 years, after a while, I think they kind of just said, all right, let's kind of take a back seat, back off of the streets a little bit and try to go into like more money schemes and things like that. Black like black market, internet, technological things like that. Because that's, you see the patterns if you study Italian organized crime. I mean, gambling was pretty much always a constant. So were narcotics, but you see how they took advantage of what was available. Like when liquor was illegal, well, look how much money we can make off of liquor. You saw how that went. When they stopped that, they went more heavily into gambling and probably a little bit more drugs as time went on. Yeah, I think it's just again a combination of things that add up to their presence today. I don't think it's definitely not the same, but it's there. I think it's a combination of things that makes them what they are today.
Okay. So in time we have left, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about you. Because like you mentioned early on that you're like a business major, but you've done some really heavy, serious research. This is like journalism level research you've been doing. So what's kind of your plan ultimately, as far as like with the research you're doing?
Well, I'm hoping if I can kind of make my own path. I want to be able to get into documentaries one day and maybe, movies or something. Definitely documentaries, maybe books, kind of like yourself. And I want to mention, you are actually kind of like a role model to me.
Oh, thanks.
So, yeah, you do great work, man. So, I'm kind of in the learning stages right now. I try to take little things from people like you and, other, top of the line guys in the field and maybe create my own path. Maybe one day I can make a magazine or something like that. It's definitely going to be in somewhat trailblazing fashion, if you know what I mean, because it's hard to, it's not a big field, being an organized crime, quote unquote, I guess you could say expert. So it would require me creating my own lane, trying to do new things. But if I'm gonna, stick to that, that would probably be what I would try to do. And having the business degree helps with that because it's something to fall back on and also know what I want to do if I do want to start a magazine or write a book or I'm kind of in the stages where I want to help and learn, whatever it may be. Someone write a book, help someone do research for a story, help for a documentary, a video on YouTube, as simple as that. Like that's what I want to do now and grow, get bigger if I can. But like something I wanted, what?
No, I'm gonna say you're definitely on the right track. Cause I was really a lot of that stuff I've never heard before, and I've been researching this for years. So you really definitely do your homework. I say that.
Thank you, man. Yeah. I mean, I try. I mean, I'll throw this out there. If you ever want to get into something, we can definitely collaborate on something.
Most definitely.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Anything, any project, whatever, I would be down. I have some material that worthy of some cool, production.
And is there any particular person or area that you're particularly researching now? Anything specifically?
Right now, I'm kind of all over the place.
Okay.
I would say, Paterson, Bumpy Johnson are kind of always ongoing. You know how that goes.
Mhm.
It kind of
Yeah.
never stops. When we
Yeah.
were talking, before this the other day a little bit, you mentioned like it took you years to get some of the really cool stuff that you have. So
Yeah.
it's kind of an ongoing thing with those two areas.
Mm.
I've been looking into recently. I've been trying to find more of the Hispanic American underworld. So I've been looking into
Okay.
like the Cubans. I've been trying to find like Spanish kingpins. Um, that's kind of been my, I guess, kick lately. Uh,
Okay.
Things like that. And I also have, a big, I'm always interested in finding new like street legends, like drug kingpins and stuff like that of the
Mhm.
Black community. Um, that's kind of ongoing for me too, because there's so many. Um, and then of course finding pictures. That's like another thing I like to do, find rare pictures of any kind of organized crime figure. That's all cool
Yeah.
to me. It doesn't, or like I said, drug kingpin, drug lord. I mean, New York City alone had so many. Um, it's kind of just ongoing for whatever. I'm cool.
Right. Right.
I'm an
Okay.
open book. I'm always looking for new things, whatever. So whatever pops in my head, it's kind of weird. Like sometimes I'll see like a random city I might have never heard of in America, and I'll just plug
Mhm.
it. Like I'll Google it, or not Google it. I'll look into an archive. I'll search
Mhm.
like this town, and then like drug ring or something like that, and I'll find like um, you know, un not unknown, but like low key figures. So
Mhm.
that's my thing. I guess if I had to say one thing, it would just be finding low key, unknown to the public
Yeah.
historically. I kind of I don't study as much as the newer stuff, present day
Mhm.
stuff as I do historically. Something about history, kind of like you. Something I
Yeah.
think you're similar, like the historical stuff kind of
Mhm.
pulls you in a little bit more. And I'm going to
Definitely.
show, I just want to show this Bumpy Johnson picture again, because before the screen was blurry. Um,
Okay.
so I just want to, I'll show you that again.
Cool. Cool. Yeah.
The
Definitely.
headline is "They Tell of Knifing." So for some reason I can't read this, but I wanted to read it to you. I think it says manacled and hampered by leg leans, Lawrence Trumbull and Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, Alcatraz prisoners, appear briefly in corridor at federal court building where they were scheduled to testify, and another Alcatraz prisoner. So here's that picture of Bumpy
Okay.
with
Wow.
Lawrence Trumbull, another
Mhm.
Alcatraz. He was a bank robber.
Okay.
So that's a really cool picture of Bumpy. Like this is a rare one.
It does look, Forrest Whitaker does look like him a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
He
That's a
doesn't.
cool photo. I've never seen that one before. That's a
Yeah,
great find.
yeah. And there's a few more. If you ever want to scroll through my page, I know I got a lot, but there's a couple in there that I posted that I never saw before I found them.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, he's somebody I try to find rare pictures of because it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. Definitely. Okay. So in a couple few minutes we got left, where can the people find you? They want to like go to your look at your research. What's your social medias?
I would say the main one is on Instagram. I'm
Okay.
kind of in the early process of maybe starting a blog. I don't really know how to start with that, but it's at Underworld Legends on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, but those two are just connected, so it's the same thing really. But
Okay.
I would say if you're gonna try to follow me, I'll go on Instagram. Um, yeah, that's my main social media.
Okay. Well, man, bro, I really appreciate you taking your time out your schedule to come chop it up with me today. I really enjoyed this. I learned a whole lot, and I'm sure my listeners did as well. So, man, I wish you much success. We definitely gonna have to collaborate on some research, because you got some really good stuff. So,
Thanks, Mike.
and I hope if there's anybody out here listening, you need a researcher or someone to work in a documentary, look him up, Underworld Legends. He can definitely be an asset to you. Yeah.
Appreciate that, Mike. Thank you. And the
Mhm.
same goes to you, man. I really love the work you do, man. Some of
Oh,
the
thank you.
some of the documents and artifacts you have are just awesome, incredible
Thank
stuff,
you.
really good stuff.
Yeah. Like I said, we out here, we do the hard work and just put it up for people to see the easy stuff. But man, it's been, like I said, it's been years finding some of that stuff. So I'm always glad to talk to someone else who can appreciate, good research, because it ain't easy. I tell you that.
And
And whereas you already know.
I know, man. No, I'm not kidding, man. I'm trying to follow in your footsteps. I'm trying to learn from you, man, because you've been doing this a lot longer than me.
Well, you ain't far behind. Like I said, you got some good stuff that I've never seen before. So definitely. Yeah. So, okay, YouTube, I hope you all enjoy this. Thanks for tuning in. PNG Media News. Look my guy Joey up at Underworld Legends on Instagram and Facebook. So until next time, YouTube, take care.
Take it easy.